Chika, my hair is burning. Why is there no water?
Ngozi, bring the bucket, the blue one. Shan, hold her head forward. Don't let it touch her neck. Now.
Madam, the generator don't die again, oh. Now the second time this week.
Not now. God, now.
Madam owner, now local government will be. No waste our time. Attend to us sharp.
Please give me 2 minutes. I have emergency inside.
2 minutes, 10 minutes. We know they go anywhere. Oh. You don't pay for your signage.
I paid that one 3 weeks ago.
Chika, please, it's burning. Ugh.
We're rinsing now. Hold on. Ovation, pour.
Imagine doing everything right. You studied hard, learned a skill people genuinely needed, saved money for years, opened your dream business, treated customers with respect, paid every bill you could afford, prayed before opening your shop every morning. And yet, 11 months later, you're sitting outside that same business, crying. Not because business was slow, not because customers stopped coming, but because it felt like Nigeria itself had declared war on your dream. One problem? You can survive. 2, maybe. But what happens when the electricity disappears? The generator breaks down. The government arrives demanding another levy. Your landlord betrays you. Your bank refuses to lend you money. And your customer is screaming because her hair is literally burning, all on the same day. Most businesses never recover from that. Sometimes, the biggest enemy isn't your competition. It's the system you're trying to survive. And that's exactly why this story matters. Because whether you're running a salon in Port Harcourt, a restaurant in Lagos, a shop in Kano, or even a startup in New York, the battle is surprisingly the same. It's the story of a young woman, a tiny salon, and a business Nigeria simply couldn't kill. But before we begin, if you enjoy stories about business, resilience, money, and the lessons hidden inside everyday lives, consider subscribing. Every week on this channel, we uncover true stories that teach real lessons ordinary people can actually use. Now, let me introduce you to Chika.
The receptionist answered phone calls. For a brief moment, everything looked normal. Then, the lights went out. Every machine died instantly. The fans stopped. The dryers went silent. Even the music disappeared. Nobody moved. Everyone already knew what came next. The generator. Ovation rushed outside. One pull. Nothing. Second pull. Nothing. Third pull. The engine coughed, roared, then died again. He tried again. Nothing. He looked toward Chika. His face said everything. "Madam, the generator done die." Chika closed her eyes. Just for 1 second. "Not today, please. Not today." Before she could think, a scream ripped through the salon. "Ah! My hair! My head is burning!" One of the customers jumped from her chair. The relaxer had stayed on her scalp far longer than it should. Without electricity, the water pump wasn't working. Without water, they couldn't rinse the chemicals immediately. Seconds suddenly mattered. "Ngozi, the blue bucket, now!" Everyone started moving. Buckets, bowls, bottled water, anything they could find. Just as they finally began rinsing her hair, bang, bang, bang! Someone was pounding on the metal door. Not a customer, not a supplier. A voice shouted from outside. "Madam, open. Now local government, we get small matter to discuss."
Chika froze. Seriously? Now? She shouted back. Please, I have an emergency. Give me 2 minutes. The reply came immediately. No problem, we go wait. But today, you must settle this signage matter. Another levy, another payment, another interruption. She almost laughed. Almost. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated. Bank notification. She didn't even look. She already knew it wasn't good news. At that exact moment, she wasn't thinking about profit. She wasn't thinking about growth. She wasn't thinking about expansion. She was thinking only one thing. Can I survive today? If you had walked past Divine Roots that afternoon, you probably would have reached the same conclusion thousands of Nigerians reach every single year. This business won't last. Honestly.
You wouldn't have been wrong, because this wasn't just another difficult day. It was 11 months of pressure finally exploding. People often think businesses fail because the owners don't work hard enough. Sometimes that's true. Most times it isn't. Long before Chika opened Divine Roots, she was already known for one thing: her hands. She could braid almost anything: cornrows, box braids, twists, locks, natural styles. By secondary school, women twice her age were asking her to do their daughter's hair. Not because she was cheap, because she was good, really good. She grew up in Ogbogoro, one of those communities where everybody knows everybody. If you scored high in school, the neighbors knew. If you argued with your parents, the neighbors knew. If someone came visiting your house, the neighbors definitely knew. Life wasn't luxurious. Her father repaired generators, an irony that would make her smile years later. Her mother sold provisions from a tiny kiosk attached to their house. Money was always planned. Nothing was wasted. Her mother had one rule: before school, before work, before business, God first, every morning, without exception. One day, a teenage Chika became impatient. "Mama, if I don't leave now, another stylist will collect my customer." Her mother smiled. Then said something Chika would remember for the rest of her life. "If someone else can collect what God already planned for you, then maybe it wasn't yours." At the time, it sounded like another sermon. Years later, it became an anchor. By university, Chika studied business administration. Not because she wanted an office job, she wanted to understand business. There was a difference. She wasn't dreaming about becoming the best hairstylist. She wanted to become the woman who owned the salon everyone talked about. There was just one problem. She had never run a business. Not really. That education would come later, and it would be expensive. After graduation, she didn't return home. She went to Lagos.
If Nigeria has a city that forces entrepreneurs to grow quickly, it's Lagos. Everything moves faster. Customers, competition, rent, ideas, failure, success. She joined 2 friends. Together, they opened a small salon. Nothing fancy, no celebrity clients, no luxury furniture, just good service, consistency, and relentless work. The first 6 months were brutal. Some days, they barely made enough to cover expenses. Other days, they celebrated one customer as though they had won a national award. Slowly, things changed. Satisfied customers returned. Then they brought friends. Those friends brought families. Instagram started working in their favor. By the end of the 2nd year, the business wasn't just surviving, it was growing. For the first time in her life, Chika felt something dangerous. Confidence. Maybe too much confidence. Because confidence has a strange way of convincing us that success in one city automatically guarantees success somewhere else. Then one evening, she shocked everyone. "I'm moving back to Port Harcourt." The room went silent. Ifeoma looked at her, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because it sounded impossible. "You won't leave Lagos." "Go where?" "Port Harcourt."
Blessing shook her head. My sister, Lagos gets problems, but at least the problems have a routine. Port Harcourt's own. She paused. A surprise package. Everybody laughed, except Chika. She had already made up her mind. If we built this from nothing, she said quietly, I believe I can build something even better back home. She truly believed that. And maybe that's what every entrepreneur needs. A little courage, a little optimism, and just enough ignorance to start anyway. What she didn't know was that Port Harcourt wasn't about to test her business skills. It was about to test everything else. 3 months later, Chika stood outside a tired-looking shop in Chinder Street, near Waterlines in Port Harcourt. The paint had faded, the floor tiles were cracked, the ceiling leaked whenever it rained, the signboard was barely hanging on. Most people walked past it without noticing. Chika looked at it and smiled. She wasn't seeing what it was, she was seeing what it could become. The landlord stood beside her. Everyone simply called him Uncle Ivy. He was one of those men every neighborhood seems to have, always smiling, always joking, always calling every young woman, my daughter. My daughter, he said warmly, this place na blessing. You go renovate ham, you go make money, you go remember say na Uncle Ivy give you this opportunity. Chika smiled. I promise you, sir, you won't recognize this place in a few months. She wasn't exaggerating. Over the next 6 weeks, every naira she had saved in Lagos disappeared. New tiles, modern mirrors, imported wash basins, air conditioners, professional lighting, comfortable waiting chairs, a beautiful reception desk, fresh paint, a bold new signboard. When everything was finished, people driving past slowed down. Some even asked, when did this salon open? It looked like something you would expect to find in Lekki, not Chinder. She called it Divine Roots, because she believed beauty should begin at the roots, just like success. Soon she hired 2 young stylists, Ngozi and Ovation, both talented, both hungry, both grateful for the opportunity. The first customer walked in on a Monday morning, the second came before noon. By Friday, people were already recommending Divine Roots to friends. 1 customer became 5, 5 became 10, 10 became 20. For the first time, Chika allowed herself to breathe. Maybe everyone had been wrong. Maybe returning home really was the right decision. She called her mother that evening. Mama, I think it's working. Her mother laughed. I told you, when God opens a door, no man can close it. Neither of them knew that some doors don't close all at once. Sometimes they close 1 hinge at a time. The first warning wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a robbery.
It wasn't even a customer complaint. It was darkness. Again. 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 The electricity disappeared for most of the week. At first, Chika wasn't worried. She had planned for this. She bought a generator before opening. Problem solved. Or so she thought. Then, petrol prices climbed. Again. Again. One afternoon, Ovation walked into her office carrying a small notebook. Madam, I calculate everything. Chika looked up. What happened? We spend almost 80,000 naira on fuel this month. She frowned. That can't be right. He handed her the notebook. She checked the numbers herself. Fuel. Fuel. More fuel. She reached for the calculator. Pressed the buttons twice. The answer stayed the same. She leaned back. Silently. Her generator wasn't supporting the business anymore. The business was supporting the generator. Think about that for a moment. Imagine owning a salon. Not a filling station, not a transport company, a salon. Yet every month, your biggest expense isn't rent. It isn't salaries. It isn't hair products. It's keeping the lights on. How do you grow a business like that? How do you save? How do you expand? How do you even breathe? Nobody teaches you this part of entrepreneurship. People celebrate opening day. Nobody posts pictures of diesel receipts. And unfortunately, that was only the beginning. 3 weeks later, another visitor arrived. Not a customer, not a supplier. A government official. He smiled politely. "Good afternoon, madam. I'm from environmental. Just one small levy." She paid. A week later, someone else arrived. Signage permit. She paid again. Then came sanitation. Business premises. Waste management. Fire safety. Local government. State government. Another agency she'd never heard of. Every single visitor said exactly the same thing. It's just a small payment. Small? Maybe. But small payments have a dangerous habit. They add up. One receipt became 5. 5 became 12. Soon, Chika bought a large brown envelope. Not for money. For receipts. Every payment.
Every official. Every date. Every signature. Everything went inside. One afternoon, Ngozi stared at the growing envelope. "Madam, how many taxes person they pay for one business?" Chika smiled sadly. "I wish I knew." Then she said something every entrepreneur watching this will understand. The painful part isn't even paying. It's never knowing whether the next person knocking on your door is collecting something legitimate or simply collecting because they know you're afraid. If you've ever owned a business, especially here in Port Harcourt, you probably know exactly what she meant. Tell me in the comments, what's the most frustrating challenge you faced while running a business? Power? Rent? Customers? Government levies? Or something else entirely? I'd really like to hear your story. Because chances are, someone reading your comment has gone through the same thing. Unfortunately for Chika, the receipts weren't the biggest problem. The biggest problem was waiting quietly, watching, smiling, pretending to be happy for her. His name was Uncle Ibe. And soon, he was about to show her a side she never imagined existed. If you've lived long enough, you've probably met someone like Uncle Ibe. The kind of person everyone trusts. The kind of person who always has a smile, always has a joke, always has advice. The kind of man who greets you before you greet him. When Chika first met him, he felt more like family than a landlord. Whenever he walked past the salon, he would stop. "My daughter, business they move?" Sometimes he'd buy a soft drink for the staff, other times he'd wave at customers. "You people are in good hands." He loved saying that. Chika appreciated him. In fact, she often told her mother, "I thank God I found a good landlord." Her mother always replied, "Thank God, but don't trust people more than you trust God." At the time, it sounded unnecessary. After all, what could possibly go wrong? Then something changed.
Not in Chika, in the business. Every evening, the salon became busier. Customers started waiting outside. Cars lined the street. People who had never heard of Divine Roots began asking about it. Even nearby shops noticed. That new salon, they're doing well. One evening, Uncle IB stood quietly across the road, watching. Customer after customer walked inside. Stylists laughing, hairdryers humming, cash changing hands. He didn't say a word. He simply watched. Sometimes, success attracts customers. Other times, it attracts something else. Envy. One Sunday evening, just after church, Uncle IB stopped by. His smile looked the same, but somehow it felt different. "My daughter, you really transformed this place." "Thank you, sir. I only did my best." He nodded, then looked around the salon. New mirrors, new furniture, air conditioners, modern lighting. Everything looked expensive. He smiled again. Then he asked quietly, "So, how much do you make every month?" The question caught Chika off guard. She laughed politely. "It depends, sir. No 2 months are the same." He nodded slowly. "I understand. But business is good. It is improving." Another smile. Another silence. Then he left. That night, something didn't sit right. Why was her landlord interested in her income? She brushed it aside. Maybe she was overthinking. A week later, he returned. This time, he got straight to the point. "My daughter, I've been thinking. The rent you're paying, it's too small." Chika blinked. "Too small? But sir, our agreement still has several months left." "I know, but look at your business now. You can afford more." She remained respectful. "Sir, I invested almost everything renovating the shop. We both agreed on this rent before I spent that money." Uncle IB leaned forward. "My daughter, business has changed, so rent must change too." Chika felt her heartbeat rising. Carefully, she reached for her lease agreement. She placed it on the table. "Sir, this agreement still has 5 months."
He looked at it, didn't even touch it, then smiled. Paper can always change. The room suddenly felt colder. For the first time, she realized she wasn't negotiating with the same man who welcomed her months ago. For several weeks, nothing happened. Life returned to normal. Customers came, staff worked, business continued. Maybe, she thought, the conversation was over. She was wrong. One evening, just before closing, Uncle IB appeared again. The staff had already gone home. Only Chika remained. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him. "My daughter, I've been thinking again." She forced a smile. "What is it, sir?" He looked around to make sure they were alone, then spoke quietly. "You know, all this rent issue, it doesn't have to be difficult." She frowned. "I don't understand." He smiled, a smile she had never seen before. "If you and I become close, you won't have to worry about rent anymore." Silence. For a moment, Chika wasn't even sure she had heard him correctly. Surely, he couldn't mean. No, he couldn't. Then he repeated it, slower. "You understand what I'm saying?" Her stomach tightened. This wasn't about rent. It never was. She stood up immediately. Her voice was calm, but firm. "Sir, I rented a shop from you. Nothing more. And that's all there will ever be." The smile disappeared. Instantly. The room felt different. His eyes hardened. "You should think about it." She shook her head. "I already have." Another long silence. Then he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "You'll regret this." The door closed behind him. For several minutes, Chika couldn't move. She wasn't angry. She wasn't crying. She was shocked. Because betrayal hurts differently when it comes from someone you respected. That night, she didn't tell anyone. Not Ngozi. Not Ovation. Not even her mother. She convinced herself it was over. She hoped he would simply let it go. But some people
don't handle rejection well, especially when they believe power is on their side. And Uncle Ibe owned the building, which meant he believed he owned the future of Divine Roots too. He was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. 3 weeks later, Chika arrived early, earlier than usual. She had appointments booked from 9 o'clock. As she turned the corner, something felt strange. 2 large men stood outside her salon, arms folded, expressionless. She smiled politely. "Good morning." Neither man replied. She reached into her handbag, pulled out her keys. One of them stepped forward. "Madam, you no fit enter." She frowned. "I'm sorry." "Ogre say make nobody enter." "What ogre?" "Our ogre, Uncle Ibe." She laughed nervously. There must be a mistake. She held up her keys. "I rent this shop." The second man spoke. "Ogre don rentam give another person." The words didn't make sense. She looked past them, through the glass, and what she saw made her heart stop. Inside, another woman was arranging salon chairs. Someone else was measuring the mirrors. Her chairs, her reception desk, her salon. It felt like watching strangers moving to your house while you're still paying the mortgage. No, this can't be happening. She reached for her bag, pulled out the lease agreement, held it in front of them. "My lease still has 4 months. I paid everything. I have receipts." The first man barely looked. "Madam, we no day argue. We day work." She looked around. People had started gathering. Customers, nearby traders, passers-by. Nobody said a word. Everyone simply watched. Imagine spending years saving money, months building a business, working through blackouts, fuel shortages, taxes, stress, only to lose everything. Not because your business failed, but because one powerful person decided your agreement no longer mattered. Standing there, on that roadside, Chika asked herself one question. Is this how my dream ends?
For almost a year, she hadn't just been building a salon. She had been building something far more powerful, something money couldn't buy, something Uncle Ibe never noticed. And in the next hour, that invisible investment would save her business. There's an old African proverb that says, "The tree you water today may become the shade that saves you tomorrow." At the time, Chika didn't know she had been planting trees. She simply believed in treating people well, not because she expected anything in return, but because that's how she was raised. Every December, she braided the children of struggling widows for free. Whenever Mama Tammy, the woman who sold pepper soup 2 shops away, had to rush home because one of her grandchildren was sick, Chika would quietly watch her shop for a few minutes. No payment, no announcement, just kindness. When Shibweze, the young phone repair technician next door, ran out of electricity because his tiny generator failed, Chika stretched an extension cable from her own generator. "Plug your soldering iron here. We'll manage." Sometimes, she gave free haircuts to security guards who couldn't afford one. Sometimes, she stayed after closing hours because a bride had nowhere else to go. Sometimes, she let customers pay later, not because she was rich, because she remembered what it felt like to have nothing. Those moments seemed small, forgettable, ordinary. But life has a strange accounting system. It remembers deposits,
long after we've forgotten making them. Standing outside her locked salon, Chika had no lawyer, no politician, no powerful relative, but she had something she didn't realize she possessed: trust, respect, and a community that knew exactly who she was. The first person to speak was Mama Tammy. She had been watching everything from her pepper soup stand. She dropped the ladle, wiped her hands on her wrapper, walked straight toward the two men. "Ona say wetin?" One of them answered, "Madam, this no concern you."
She folded her arms. "It concern me. This girl pay her rent. I know. I was there when she opened." The second man rolled his eyes. "Madam, a beg shift." Before she could respond, another voice came. "Who locked Divine Roots?" It was Chibueze, then the boutique owner, then the POS operator, then the fruit seller. Within minutes, people started leaving their own businesses, one after another. Nobody planned it, nobody called a meeting, nobody sent WhatsApp messages. They simply came. Because good character has a way of gathering witnesses. Soon, 20 people stood outside the salon, then 30, then almost 50. Customers arriving for appointments refused to leave. "I booked this appointment. What happened?" Someone answered. "The landlord won't collect the shop." "What? But she still dey pay rent." Another customer joined. "This no make sense." The atmosphere changed. The two men looked at each other. This wasn't what they expected. They were prepared for one frightened woman, not an entire street. Then someone shouted, "Call Uncle Ibe." Another voice joined. "Make he come explain himself." Another, "We no go allow this." Nobody was violent. Nobody threw punches. Nobody destroyed anything. They simply refused to leave. Sometimes, the strongest protest is refusing to pretend something is normal. About 40 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Uncle Ibe, still smiling, still calm, but this time, the smile looked nervous. He hadn't expected a crowd. He certainly hadn't expected that crowd to be defending Chika. My people, calm down. It's just a misunderstanding." Nobody answered. Mama Tammy spoke first. "Misunderstanding? You collect this girl's money. You collect her renovation. Now you won't collect the shop too." The crowd murmured. Uncle Ibe tried to laugh. "No be like that." Chibueze stepped forward. "Oga, then explain him." For the first time, Uncle Ibe realized something. His reputation, the same reputation that helped him collect rent from dozens of tenants, was now on trial.
Not in court. On the street. Where it mattered most. He looked at Chika, then at the growing crowd, then at the woman already arranging chairs inside the salon. He sighed. Finally, he spoke. "Open the shop." The two men looked surprised. "Oga?" "I say, open the shop." Slowly, they stepped aside. Chika stood there, unable to believe what was happening. Someone handed her the keys. The crowd clapped. Not because justice had won completely, but because injustice had lost. She unlocked the door, walked inside, ran her fingers across the reception desk she had built with years of sacrifice. For a brief second, she closed her eyes. Not to celebrate, to thank God. Outside, customers applauded. Mama Tammy hugged her. Ngozi cried openly. Even Ovation, who rarely showed emotion, wiped tears from his face. Uncle Ibe quietly got back into his SUV. He didn't look at anyone. He simply drove away. That afternoon, Chika reopened the salon. Business continued. But something inside her had changed forever. She no longer believed success alone protected businesses. Relationships did. Character did. Community did. She had accidentally discovered a lesson that no university had ever taught her. People invest in people before they invest in businesses. And when people truly believe in you, they'll sometimes protect your dream, as if it were their own. But life wasn't finished testing her. Not even close. Because the greatest battle of divine roots was still ahead. It wouldn't involve a landlord, or a crowd, or even the government. It would happen, late one Thursday night, when Chika finally sat down, opened the bank notification she had ignored all day, and realized She had just received her 5th loan rejection. That night, for the first time since leaving Lagos, she seriously considered giving up, closing Divine Roots, packing everything, and going back. Would she? Or would one conversation change everything? That's where our story goes next.
If this story moved you, don't just watch silently. Tell us in the comments, what challenge almost made you give up on your dream? Your story might encourage someone else who is reading. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join us. Every week we bring you remarkable stories of resilience, business, and the lessons hidden in ordinary lives. Until next time, remember, sometimes the strongest businesses aren't the ones that never struggle. They're the ones that refuse to stay down.